Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm hanging out again with my friend Kat from thecreativeintrovert.com. And Kat has been helping me to aggregate questions from all of you and has been helping to frame those questions and create a little bit more of a conversation around them so that we can explore and unpack the questions that you have about astrology together. So thanks for being here again, Kat. It's fun to do these talks together.
Yeah, it is. I'm really enjoying it. And today's topic I thought would be quite timely, as at the time of recording, is it 4 planets are retrograde right now? And
Right.
yeah, I thought we could talk about retrograde cycles.
Yeah, that's a great topic. Everyone always has questions about retrograde cycles. And I've done a bunch of talks on retrogrades, but I don't think we've ever just done one straight Q&A on retrogrades. So this should be fun.
Yeah. And I guess the first one that a lot of people coming to astrology ask and assume maybe is, are retrogrades a bad thing? Are they something that we should be scared of?
No, a simple way of thinking about retrogrades is to think about the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching, which says that which is full will be emptied and that which is emptied will be filled. So retrogrades are just the natural back and forth movement of planets. Planets move direct through the zodiac in zodiacal order: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, so on around the wheel, 30 degrees per sign. They all have different speeds they're all moving at. And occasionally they sit down, they stop, they move backward for a while, then they sit down and they stop, and then they start moving forward again. All of the planets except for the sun and the moon exhibit that behavior. And so it's just a natural part. It should be understood as a natural element of planetary motion. It's not some crazy thing. It's just one aspect of how planets move. So there's nothing scary about it. And just like things are empty and things are full, things move forward, things move backward, and forward and backward motion have a lot of different symbolic meanings behind them. So it's not something to be scared of at all. You just have to understand the different things that forward and backward motion might entail.
Right. Yeah. And it's maybe not an easy thing to get used to at first. Like, I think there are so many other things in astrology where we instinctually want to say that thing is good or that thing is bad. But realizing that both are necessary in a way can be really helpful. I found it helpful anyway.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, it might be easier to understand that if Mercury is retrograde in the sky right now, maybe that's not such a objectively bad thing. But if it's retrograde in your birth chart, that can be a bit harder to maybe detach from in a way. And so I'm just wondering, like, what can retrograde signify in somebody's birth chart versus in the sky right now?
Yeah, so they're always retrograde in your birth chart. Whatever's happening in the sky is affecting your birth chart in some way. So the retrogrades will always have some personal way of manifesting. And for ancient astrologers, not all retrogrades are built equal. So depending on what time or season of life that you are in, and we use a variety of different timing techniques in order to understand which planets are empowered at different times in a person's life. Different planetary transits, such as a retrograde, will have different effects or different significance and power at different times. So for example, if you're in a perfection year that lands in one of the houses of Mercury, like Virgo or Gemini, and therefore Mercury is one of the planetary time lords of the year, then those Mercury retrogrades are going to be more significant that year. Or if you have Mercury retrograding in one of the 4 angular houses, 1, 10, 7, or 4, or if Mercury is retrograding over a really significant planet that's already getting a hard aspect from Saturn, so there's a lot of contextual factors that will help us as astrologers hone in on which retrogrades are really important for each individual birth chart. So it's a complex thing, and it's never a good idea. It's never a good idea to just sit down and be like, oh my God, retrogrades, it's going retrograde. And so that means this and that's it. It's always probably about 4 or 5 times more specific, individual, and personal. And it may not be affecting a person at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And obviously I'm pretty new to astrology, but just noticing that myself and realizing that not all of these retrogrades are going to affect me differently, and some are more obvious than others, basically. But yeah, actually the retrograde planets in somebody's chart, I guess, I mean, so one person, for example, asked, what if they have many retrograde planets in their chart, like more than 4 or something? Does this maybe make them more comfortable with when planets or those planets are retrograde in the sky? What does that mean for somebody? Or is it just like they do everything backwards or something?
Yeah. So I think we should just like almost like bracket this off by saying that a retrograde planet in your birth chart means something very different than a transiting retrograde planet to your birth chart. So for example, Mercury is about to retrograde in Cancer as we're making this video. May or may not impact the Cancerian whole sign house of your chart or other dimensions of your chart, depending on all of these specific contextual factors that I was just talking about. But if you were born with Mercury retrograde in Cancer or some other sign, any other sign, that's going to take on another very specific and entirely different meaning than just some retrograde that's happening. People always think, well, does it mean something special that I was born with the planet retrograde? And then whenever that planet goes, like I was born with the Venus retrograde, does that mean something magical happens every time Venus goes retrograde? And the answer is no. Well, if I was born with a Mercury retrograde, am I just like more tuned into Mercury retrogrades? And the answer is no. The reason for that is that that retrogrades don't, unless you're doing a purely psychological approach to astrology, meaning every planet is just a descriptive element of your behavior or your psychology, which is not the way that ancient astrology was practiced. That might be one part of it, but ancient astrology was also describing your karma, meaning the field of karma in many different areas of your life, marriage, money, children, parents, property, your health, all sorts of different things. So a retrograde planet typically means that there's going to be reversals of some kind, for better, for worse. It's again super contextual, but you can just think of again, whatever is emptied will be full, and whatever is full will be emptied. So wherever there's gain or progress, there's going to be regress or going backward with planets when they retrograde. So what is gained will be given back, or what was moving forward will be delayed. There might be some kind of regression and then eventually moving forward again. Sometimes it it might represent a time of turning inward or revising or going back to look over something from the past. But just generally, retrogrades mean reversals psychologically, emotionally, revisions, reversals, delays, setbacks. But then it's also part of a longer process. So you have to study what that means in particular in a chart based on what the planet rules. For example, if Mercury rules your money or your finances, then when Mercury goes retrograde, if Mercury is in an empowered moment in your chart, vis-a-vis one of these Time Lord systems, for example, then you may have some really interesting reversals around money or finances. For example, right now, Venus is retrograde, and in my own chart, that falls in my second house of money and finances. And as that was happening, we changed one of our processors for payments on our website, right? So that reversal, that kind of, it was like, it sort of came up unexpectedly that this happened too. And we also had to shift some of our, we had a yoga studio that was like a brick and mortar location here in the DC area, and we closed it. And so there was other financial things that needed to be changed because we no longer have a brick and mortar location. So there was all of these different kind of, and these financial adjustments that needed to be made for me recently. And those were things that I didn't see coming, that I almost, they were like there, but I wasn't as aware of them. Well, I have had other Venus retrogrades in different areas of my chart, even in my second house before. Venus happens to be an empowered Time Lord in my chart right now. And so this retrograde was more like, flying around like you do sometimes during Mercury retrogrades, where you're like, why does there seem to be some level of chaos and having to redo things? And, you somehow your cell phone breaks, or some craziness that comes up, and it's not because retrogrades are always like that. It's because of the context of your chart and when a retrograde planet is empowered in your chart, and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you have a retrograde planet that you're born with, the reversals that are going to happen with that planet are less about that planet going retrograde, because that's going to happen really frequently, and more about triggers coming from other slower moving planets. For example, let's say you have, say you were born with Venus retrograde in your career house. It's more likely that the reversals, the major life reversals that may have something to do with your career, with Venus retrograde in the 10th house of career, will come when slower moving planets aspect that Venus, when Jupiter opposes it or squares it, when Saturn opposes it or squares it, when Pluto or Neptune or Uranus go through a long trine or sextile or some specific degree based aspect to it. So that's, so typically if you're born with a retrograde, the reversals that it indicate will be more pivotal life-changing events, and you'll know when they're happening because you're tracking out transits to that planet in your chart. It's not just when the retrogrades occur successively.
Okay, that's really helpful. There's one example, and you can correct me if this is bad astrology, but it's Kurt Cobain's chart, and he has Jupiter retrograde, I think.
It's in Cancer, I believe.
Yeah, and Jupiter rules his 4th house and his 7th house.
Right. Yeah. So,
and those are areas of life where he saw like good fortune at first, and then things got reversed. So his very early childhood was positive, then it took a turn south. Same with his relationships, like with Courtney Love, all of these different people. You read about things kind of going well and being really sweet, and then having a really extreme reversal.
Yeah, that's a great example. Because and with his father and family and roots too. That story, did you watch that documentary Montage of Heck?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that was really good. If you haven't seen that, anyone who's watching, check that out, and then we'll look at his birth chart. But yeah, that's a perfect example because it's an exalted Jupiter, and then it starts off really good. There's all these seemingly great benefits, and then there's these really intense reversals. You'd have to track out his transits, but my guess would be that at least some of those transits are going to coincide with Saturn or Jupiter or one of the outer planets hitting that Jupiter. That would be most likely.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at.
Yeah.
So another part of the retrograde cycle of a planet is this moment when the planet itself coincides with the sun, what you call a Cazimi. What does that mean? And like, I guess I'm asking a little bit more about the journey itself, the journey that a planet takes. And I know this is a massive topic that you go into a lot in your first year course, so we can't do it all, but maybe just explain to us a little bit about that moment.
The Cazimi moment, right?
Yeah.
So the planet, any planet, and but I want to say another qualifying remark. I don't recommend paying a whole huge amount of attention to outer planets retrograde. I'm not saying they have no effect, but they're very slow and very long periods of retrogradation. Retrograde is a concept best fitted to the traditional 7 planets, excluding the sun and the moon, obviously. So you've got 5 planets to pay attention to the retrogrades of. It makes it a lot easier to deal with retrogrades both natally and in transit. So when people are like, oh my God, 5 planets are retrograde, it's like, yeah, it happens a couple times a year. Everyone flips out. Tell me what it means. No one ever has anything coherent to say. So, and I'm not trying to be cynical, but it's just the truth. Like, it doesn't mean anything that 5 planets are retrograde if 3 of them are Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, because they, like half the year they're retrograde. So anyway, so that's just an aside. But the Cazimi moment of any of the traditional planets when they're at the heart of the sun means that the sun, which is like the, what did Vettius Valens call it? The organ of the soul's perception, almost like the eye of the soul. And so, there's where there's light, there's you can see. But seeing is, of course, not just a physical thing. We're talking about spiritually. To see means to perceive what is true, what is real. And so the light of the sun with the planet at the center of the sun, the light of the sun as spiritual apparatus illuminates something, reveals something, unconceals something that is true about the planet that it is touching in the Cazimi. So if it's Venus, something true will be revealed that is Venusian in nature. If it is, Saturn, something may be revealed that was hidden in the darkness, so on and so forth. So one meaning of Cazimi is that of revelation, of the planet in question having light poured through it and you seeing by means of it. There's a great analogy that C.S. Lewis used, and if you don't know, he was a Christian apologist, and he used this idea that the good use of a symbol in literature is not that the symbol stands out and is like, hey, I'm a symbol. Can you decode me? Can you decode my meaning? Like the like a simple example that's stupid is like the cigar is a penis. Like it's like something like this, just like, okay, I get it. Like you made this a symbol to represent this other thing, and James Hillman made a joke out of that. So Lewis says that imagine that you're walking into like a shed in your backyard, and inside of the shed is a hole in the roof of the tin roof, and there's a beam of light coming through it. If you look right at a symbol and you go, that's the symbol and that's what it means, then it's you looking at the beam of light. But actually the purpose of a symbol is for us to, when we step into the beam of light, and we, by means of the beam of light, we look out, up and out through the hole in the roof at the sky above, then the symbol has been appropriately used as a means by which to see a higher truth. And that's the actual function of light, right? So if you just look at a beam of light and go, that's a beam of light, right? That's an improper way of reading a symbol. And oftentimes, when a planet is Cazimi, it's as though suddenly there is a beam of light by means of which we see a truth connected to the planet in question, that we start seeing right into the heart of something. That's why it's at the heart of the sun, Cazimi. So, like, for example, when Venus is at the heart of the sun, there will be ways in which you see right into the essence of something in a relationship, but you won't see it as some kind of intellectual, deduction, or it's not going to be arrived at by means of like solving a problem intellectually in your head. Let's just use an example. Let's say that you're Venus at the heart of the sun. Let's say that you're in your kitchen one day and you're like scrubbing dishes, and you're with your spouse or significant other or whatever, and the spouse is, you guys are having like a typical argument, and then the spouse accidentally knocks something hot off the edge of the counter, and it shatters on the floor and it burns their foot. If you were getting really angry and being self-righteous and in the space of like, kind of assaulting them, or, like some pattern that you're in, and you're really driving something home, you're kind of beating them up or whatever. And then you realize, oh, my words are like that cup that have just fallen off the edge and burned them. See, then Venus is at the heart of the sun. You have seen something by means of a symbol that has exposed a truth, right? So it's like a synchronicity that may expose a truth in the relationship. So oftentimes planets at the heart of the sun operate like that, where they'll expose us to some beam of light by means of which we see straight into the issue the planet is trying to present by means of its own natural symbolism. In the case of Venus, it's love. In the case of Mars, it might be something about, combat or war or will or something else. So that's one meaning of Cazimi. The second, I'm sorry, this is long-winded for everyone listening. The second is that the planet becomes empowered. So the planet is as though it starts glowing and becoming effulgent and filled with a kind of radiant intensity, power, or strength. So if you've ever, Venus, same thing. Now shift it so that something Venusian starts taking on an aura around it. So it becomes emblematic of something bigger or transcendent. It carries the light with it. It's not like you're seeing by means of the light straight into the issue. Now it's as though the issue or the symbolism of the planet starts becoming effulgent. So, for example, let's say that there is a piece of artwork in your home, and it's let's say it means a lot to you or something like that. It could be that there's just a connection to something like that that's very simple or natural, like a piece of artwork or a museum that you like going to or something like that. And somehow it just starts glowing with effulgence and it speaks right to your heart. So something Venusian, in other words, will take on real strength. It can also be something really mundane. Like I'm making this pretty esoteric right now. Like Venus at the heart of the sun could just be like, suddenly I become overwhelmingly attracted to things that I want to buy, like material or retail items that just become somehow, they take on a heavenly hue. And I'm like, oh, I want that. So it can be a lot of different things. Does those two explanations make sense? And do they help?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I really like the whole the story element of the Cazimi, because I always just imagine this like kingly figure, the sun, having a word, like taking the planets aside and just be like, telling them something. And then yeah, I just like it. But you also kind of answered a question that I had about the kind of intelligence that the sun represents being different from like mercurial intelligence. Like, I don't know, the illumination, this idea of the C.S. Lewis thing you said with the looking down the beam of light. Yeah, that you just like clarified some other things for me, which may be a whole other Q&A that we need to do.
Yeah. It's helpful because it's hard to understand what being at the heart of the sun means. It's like when people hear that, they're like, yes, esoterically that strikes me as true, but what the hell does it mean? Right. You know what I mean? So then it's trying to tease that out is tricky. But yeah.
Great. Well, those are all of the questions that I have on retrogrades and retrograde cycles. But yeah, it's a massive topic, so maybe we return to it another day.
Do you have any retrogrades in your own chart, Kat?
None of the main planets. I might have one of the outer ones, like maybe Neptune, but similarly, I haven't really taken a proper look at that.
Yeah. I was born. Another thing that's really important to look at is when you're born, look at planets that were in the process of stationing and turning retrograde, or that were just about to make an appearance when they get to about 15 degrees of separation with the sun, a planet appears for the first time in either the east or the west. And so if you have a planet that was just on the edge of about 15 degrees, say anywhere between 0 to 13 degrees and separating from the sun in either direction by retrograde or direct motion, that appearance was also something that ancient astrologers paid a lot of attention to. It could mean that the planet becomes more visible in your life. So that's another little thing. Maybe we'll do another video on that sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Kat, for hosting and bringing together all of the questions that people have and just creating a little bit more of a conversation around it. So we will see you all again soon. And if you have questions for us, Kat aggregates them and tries to create these cool little interviews. And you can also check out her work at thecreativeintrovert.com and check out what she's up to. So hopefully you'll do that, and we'll see you guys again soon. Bye, everyone.